Hello and welcome. This is Story Impact. I'm your host, Lisa Tolles. I started this series because supporting authors and their stories is my passion and my calling. So this series introduces you to amazing visionaries and storytellers who share unique details of their writing journey, their challenges, and how they're differentiating themselves in an incredibly crowded marketplace. But most importantly, these conversations are about the meaning these stories bring to the authors and their readers, and how that meaning deepens our human experience. I'm also a crime novelist, and you can find my books on Amazon and through other retailers. And to learn more, go to lisatolles.com. All right, let's get started. So today I'm excited to be talking with award-winning mystery novelist Leslie Karst, whom I met at a book reading event in Orinda. And I love the sophisticated foodie theme in all of her books, and we'll talk all about that today. Leslie's the author most recently of Molten Death. Leslie, if you want to hold up your book, your beautiful book cover now. And also the Lefty Award-nominated Sally Solari mystery series. In the memoir, Justice is Served, a tale of scallops, the law, and cooking for RBG. Love it. So after years of waiting tables and singing in a new wave rock band, Leslie decided she was ready for a real job and ended up at Stanford Law School. Impressive. It was during her career as an attorney that Leslie rediscovered her youthful passion for food and cooking, and once more returned to school, this time to earn a degree in culinary arts. So now retired from the law, in addition to writing, Leslie spends her time cooking, cycling, gardening, and observing cocktail hour promptly at 5 o'clock. She and her wife and their Jack Russell mix split their time between Santa Cruz, California, and Hilo, Hawaii. Leslie, welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm very excited to be here, and congratulations on this new series you're doing. It's a great, wonderful gift to authors, and it's fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's a gift to me as well. All right, so you and I met at a book reading in Orinda a couple years ago, and since that time, I've seen you release several new books, and I'm really excited about this latest one, Molten Death. What a title. So I've heard of molten chocolate cake, but in this case, I'm sure the word molten refers to the Big Island locale and its active volcano. Can you tell us how the Big Island inspired this story?
Absolutely. Well, so, I am a foodie, so the molten chocolate was, it's a double entendre, and there is food in the book. And I do believe at one point, one of the characters does order molten lava cake because, I kind of had to do that. But yes, so my wife and I have been visiting the Big Island of Hawaii since 1990. We first went there, I believe. And my parents had fallen in love with the place and were spending a lot of time there, and we would go and stay with them. And then eventually my mom actually wanted to move to Hilo. My law professor father wouldn't leave UCLA, and so he wouldn't move there permanently. But we came up with this idea that the four of us bought a house together in Hilo 17 years ago.
Wow.
And my parents now are both gone, but Robin and I now still live there. Once we both retired from our day gigs, so to speak, we started living there half time. And it's just, the Big Island is an incredibly amazing place. Well, first of all, it is big. All the other islands together, if you put them on top of it, it still wouldn't make all of the, be as big as the Big Island. It's called the Island of Hawaii, which is confusing, hence the name, the Big Island. It's an amazing place. It's the only place that has 3 active volcanoes. And there is, right this moment, I don't believe there's any active lava, but it's been rumbling. And as a result of that, the flora and fauna, of course, obviously have been very affected by the volcanic activity, but also the culture. And when you live on a place where at any moment hot molten lava could come down and overflow and take over your home, it makes it really affects how people live there. And when that actually did in fact happen back in May of 2018, when, if you might recall,
Yep.
Kilauea erupted and it overtook like 1/3 of Leilani estates and took out the village, the town of Kapoho.
Yeah.
At that point, I'd been thinking about writing a book, and I'd actually started writing a book about it. And at that point, I said, I've got to do this. This is just it was horrible for the people, but it's an amazing natural phenomenon, and I thought would it be a great backdrop for a mystery story. So,
Mm.
yes, Molten Death it takes place during that time, and it does involve an active volcano flow, and that was the inspiration of the book. Yeah, and I just love this cover because you can see it has lava on there.
It's gorgeous. All right, so I want to hear about your protagonist for Molten Death, Valerie Corbin. What can you tell us about her? And is she based on anyone you know, or are you Valerie Corbin? And like, what can you share about her?
I mean, I think a lot of people probably would say that I'm very much her, although God knows I would never ever investigate a dead body. I would run the opposite direction. I'm a total wimp. And so she's far braver, or maybe crazier than I am. She's almost 60. In fact, she celebrates the reason that she and her wife, Kristen, have decided to come to the Big Island to celebrate her birthday, her big 60. And she's a retired caterer, because I had to get the food in there. And they originally were going to come just for rest and relaxation, but then shortly before the book opens, Valerie's brother, with whom she had been very close, and he owned a restaurant, a bistro in Venice Beach, California, which is where they both live, is killed in a car accident, and she's in the car at the same time. And he's the driver and she's the passenger, and she's pretty horrified by this. So the book opens with her trying to get over this traumatic experience that's happened, and but she's I really wanted to write a character. My last book, Sally Solari, she was younger, she was 40, and she was straight. I'm older and I'm a lesbian. I really wanted the chance to write a book about somebody that was closer to my people, so to speak. And so I was thrilled when Severn House agreed to take on this project, because it was, wasn't an easy ask. I got a lot of rejections, partly because of the tropical location. One publisher said, "Oh, we already have a book set in the tropics." It's like, really? Also, they're older, and for whatever reason, I think publishers have been leery to have older protagonists, although, they're very active. I mean, I'm active, I'm a cyclist. I'm older than Valerie. And anyway, she's snarky. I always have snarky characters.
Mm-hmm.
She and Kristen, her wife, have been together for a long time. So, they bicker. They're an old married couple, so to speak. And I just wanted to have the fact that they were gay be just not at all important in the plot, that they just are, and they live their lives and they solve a murder.
Awesome. All right. Reflecting on your really interesting background, I'm curious to hear about the how and why of your shift from the practice of law to culinary school. And do you think there are any commonalities between these two worlds?
Okay, so yeah, I actually went to culinary arts school while I was working as an attorney. I did it in late afternoons and evenings, and partly because I was sort of a disgruntled attorney. I mean, I was really lucky in that I got to write for a living. I was a research and appellate attorney for 20 years.
Mm.
It's kind of like writing a term paper every day of your life. You're doing two basic things. You're writing memos for the partners in the law firm, telling them how they should proceed with their case, explaining what the law is, and you should do this, that, or the other thing. And then the other half is doing those things, writing the persuasive motions and appeals. And I did really like writing, but you have to think really, really hard about really boring stuff. So I found it difficult. I just wasn't my passion. It was never my passion. In fact, I talk a lot about that in this book, Justice is Served.
Mm-hmm.
I cooked dinner for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because one of the, of course, ironies was that I was cooking dinner for this person who was obsessed with the law. My father, who was her colleague, and the reason I cooked the dinner for her, they both loved the law, and here I was, this person who was really griping about it, and that's one of the themes in that book. And so I decided to go back to school while I was working as an attorney, and go to my local culinary arts school here at our local community college. And I loved it. I found what, I loved, but I also realized immediately, no way did I want to work as a cook in a restaurant. I had been a waitress beforehand. It's really hard work. You work nights, weekends, holidays, your back hurts, you burn yourself. It's really intense being in a kitchen, just emotionally too, because it's high stress. There's a lot of sexism, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of drug abuse and alcohol abuse. But I did love to cook, so I started throwing fabulous dinner parties. And then once I finally did have enough money that I could retire from the law,
Mhm.
I wanted to keep writing. And it was a no-brainer. I really wanted to set it in Santa Cruz, where I have been here since 1974, and I really wanted it to be about food. So I made Sally my protagonist. She's an ex-attorney who's gone back to work at her father's old school Italian seafood restaurant.
Mm.
I was able to sort of bring in all of my, what I knew. And so she does know about the law. It sometimes helps her with the cases, dealing with probate law and that whatnot. And but I
Mm.
really wanted it to be about food too. So there those books involve her family's restaurant, and then in the first book she inherits her aunt's trendy upscale restaurant, Gauguin. And there's a dynamic in the family between that, because you don't think we're good enough anymore, our old school Italian, and you become this hipster, trendy foodie, and which is sort of fun. So I get to marry all of those things. Did I answer your question? I think I went way off on a tangent.
No, you did. No, you did. You answered it in a unique way. And I love the name Gauguin as a restaurant. And, I mean, like, mystery readers are always looking for tension. And when you bring in like restaurants and family and all that baggage, I mean, that's just a perfect marriage of like chaos. So do you feel like fiction was kind of your breakout then from kind of the boring humdrum like legal writing? And what was that transition for you like?
Yeah, it was. I had Dying for a Taste, which was the first Sally Solari book, was my first I mean, I actually had dabbled in fiction. I had started writing a romance novels with a friend of mine back in my 20s that never got past a few chapters. And but it was the first serious book that I wrote, and it was really freeing. I mean, I had been a singer and a songwriter. I had a couple bands back when I was younger, and I was a songwriter for the bands. And in retrospect, I realized that writing songs is a little bit like what we would now call flash fiction, because especially one of my bands was a country rock band, and country songs are very much little stories.
Mhm.
And I loved that. I loved writing those little stories. And so, in some sense, I did write fiction before, but I really wanted to try my hand after I retired from the law at writing a novel. And because I'd been an English lit major and I'd read all novels for years, and I thought, I bet I could do that. And then I immediately settled on writing a mystery novel, because I loved mysteries. And it gives you a framework to sort of hang the plot on,
Right.
uh,
Right.
in a way that just literary fiction doesn't. It's sort of amorphous, and I wasn't sure I was ready to do that, or that I even wanted to do that.
Mhm.
And but what surprised me is I had somebody ask me, well, so isn't it really different writing a mystery novel from writing a legal brief? And I immediately thought, yeah, it's completely different. There's nothing in common. And I had, no, actually, there's a lot in common. They're both, when you write a brief or an
Evidence, right?
appeal,
It's evidence-based.
it's evidence-based and it's persuasive. You're trying to convince the judge to decide in your favor. And so you start out with this set of facts. You have these facts of your case that are, you can't mess with them. You have them. And you have the case law, the legal backing for it. And you find it in the United States, it's mostly case law, but we have statutory law as well. But mostly you find cases, you do research and you look for a published case that has facts similar to yours in a relevant way, that decides the way you want your case to be decided. And then you apply that law to your facts. And so what you do is you usually start out with a statement of facts, and then you set out what the law is, and then you apply the law to the facts, and then you have a conclusion explaining why the judge should decide in your favor. And so it's a lot like a mystery novel, because how you put out the facts in a mystery novel, you got to play fair with the reader. So you can't leave out important facts, but you can hide
Right.
them.
That's
And
right.
you can kind of do that in your statement of facts. You can downplay ones, and you can have red herrings, but you can't leave out any vital information. Where you put it is really important, how you plot. And I realized that, no, they're actually really similar. You know, if you have that kind of detail-oriented brain, chances are, you might be a mystery writer.
Well, I've read a couple of your books and I thought they were plotted really well. It seemed like they were like, kind of well, I don't know if you're like a plotter or a pantser and like how extensively you outline, but it seemed like it was well thought out. So I can see that. I want to ask you another question about Hawaii. How does Hawaii's aloha spirit influence your stories, characters, and your writing flow? And a follow-up question is, do you have more writing productivity in Santa Cruz or in Hilo?
So you know what they say about the aloha culture is really true. It is amazing. The culture it's just a marvelous culture. Now the history of Hawaii is one of immigration, because obviously you have the Polynesians who came from the South Seas back, what, 800 years ago, and then they lived there without any other contact from other cultures until Captain Cook and his cronies came, and then shortly thereafter the whalers started coming, and then the missionaries from New England. Then the missionaries ended up basically starting plantations, and they started bringing in workers from other cultures, the Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, Filipino, who am I forgetting? And so as a result, the culture especially in Hilo, where I live, is so diverse, and these people have lived together for so long that it's an amazing culture. People don't notice much where people are from or who they are, and everybody has intermarried over the years, and as a result, it's this very welcoming culture. It really, really is, and I love that about it. I have a great little story. Soon after Robin and I moved to Hilo, we were walking down the street one afternoon, and this crowd of 5 teenage or older boys, men, big burly guys with tattoos and talking tough to each other and walking up, and we're sort of like, oh, and they walk up and they look up and they look at us and they smile and they go, in these really high voices, and they're so polite and lovely. And just that's Hawaii. I just love it. How that influenced the book, I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this new series set in Hawaii, because I loved the place so much. I wanted to show it to my readers, the real Hawaii, the one that isn't the tiki bars and luau's, touristy luau's that you read about in glossy magazines. I mean, those do exist. I mean, they are there and they're fun, by the way. I won't turn down going to a tiki bar, but there's so much more to Hawaii, particularly the off the beaten track. If you get away from Waikiki and Kona and those places, Hilo is very much sort of still caught in the 1960s. It's not very touristy because it rains a lot, scares off the tourists, but it's got this amazing culture, which is still very Hawaiian. That I think that area has the most percentage of Native Hawaiians of anywhere in the state per capita. And I just wanted to bring to my readers, show them, the real Hawaii, where people just, they have, they play basketball in their front yard or whatever, and I'm very pleased because some of the reviews from the new book have basically said that it's a great armchair traveling to get to know Hawaii, and they really feel like they are there and, gotten to know the culture.
That's awesome. What is one book you've read that inspired you more than any other?
I think if I'm going to talk about mysteries, which I will here, A is for Alibi by Sue Grafton. When I read that book I don't think I read it right when it came out. I think it came out in the early 80s. But when I did pick it up and read it, I was amazed by it, because up until that point, I'd read a fair amount of mysteries, but I had read Golden Age mysteries. I'm a big fan of Dorothy L. Sayers and Christie and Josephine Tay and those people. And then I'd read, a lot of the hard-boiled Chandler and noir and thrillers and things like that. And I picked her book up, and she'd done something for me that was new, which was she had sort of blended those two. So she has this character, Kinsey Milhone, she's a PI, and in some regards, she's sort of a hard-boiled, snarky, swearing gal. But at the same time, she has a heart of gold. She's a woman, first of all, and Grafton managed to blend those two sort of traditional and hard-boiled mysteries into a new subgenre. And it really inspired me. And I think it's when I picked up my pen or my laptop to write Dying for a Taste, I was influenced by that a lot. Hence, Sally's very snarky. Those books are terrific. I think, yeah.
So one more thing about writing and publishing, and then I want to ask you about purpose.
Mhm.
So what do you see as challenges right now in the publishing industry, and what do you see as opportunities?
So I touched on this earlier. Well, as far as the publishers being willing to publish books that are sort of outside this sort of very narrow parameters, cozy / traditional books have for the last 20 years, it's been very narrow. You know, they wanted younger protagonists set in a small town that didn't tend to dwell on other, any kind of sort of, they were very light, very, very light. And I think that that's very expanding quite a bit. They realize now that their readers are willing to read a book about A, lesbians, B, older people, set in the tropics for one. I don't think Molten Death would have been published by a traditional publisher 10 years ago. In fact, I'm certain it wouldn't have been. So that's a wonderful change. And I was just at Malice Domestic, and in one of our panels, we were talking about that in the audience, and they're like, yeah, the readers do want this. They are not as narrow as the publishers think they are. And the entire sort of cozy traditional genre is exploding now, and it's become so much more wide, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. The books that are now coming out are, they're dealing, and which is not to say, I know people want to escape, and nobody wants to be hit over the head with politics or anything like that. I certainly don't want to when I pick up a book like that, but it doesn't mean you can't have those things in the background because they're real. I mean, like, for instance, my books often take place in a restaurant kitchen, and they can be pretty horrible places. People do have alcohol problems. There is sexism. And if you just completely ignore that, I think the books come across as really fake and one-dimensional. And so that, I think they're doing a disservice to the publishers, are doing a disservice to their readers if they don't think they're interested in reading about things that are more realistic. And so I think that's changing, and I'm very, very pleased by that. So that's the good and the bad.
Well, I totally think that's true. I think publishers are willing to take more risks now because a lot of the definitions are changing, and I think readers are being more demanding than ever about wanting characters and backdrops and settings and scenarios that are relatable to modern 2024 problems and challenges. And I think that's something that your books really accomplish. And another thing about your books too, I haven't read Molten Death yet, but cozies, I think people, tell me if you agree with this. It seems like cozies historically are loved by people who don't necessarily want the kind of like gore and grisly details of some thrillers. I write thrillers, and mine are definitely not horror, and there's not anything too grisly in there. They're thrillers, but your books have a lot of action and adventure. There's a lot happening. There are a lot of layers, so it almost feels like you're kind of crossing some of the elements of thriller with your cozies, and again kind of breaking those stereotypes. And I think that's what you're consciously setting out to do, right?
Yes, I am absolutely. I was called mine snarky cozies, and I always thought of them as at the sort of the far end of cozies. And I think that the whole at Malice Domestic, I was talking to Christopher Zgorsky, who has a wonderful blog called Bolo Books, where he reviews books, and he tends not to review cozies much. He leaves that to Drew and Love. They sort of divide but he did give me a very lovely review for Molten Death, and I asked him, I said, I'm curious, how would you define this book? Cozy, traditional, what would you call it? And he said, I actually think it's a traditional. And then he told me, he said, I've heard a new phrase that's being bandied about these days, which is soft boiled. And I like that. So as opposed to hard boiled. So I think maybe just definitions are very limiting, and they are used, publishers use them because it's for bookstore owners who want to figure out, where do I put this book?
Right.
And you could just have a mystery section with all of them, but like my local bookstore does have a cozy section. And when you earmark something like that, though, you limit it. And I think that is starting to change. And yeah, the distinctions between the two are starting to be broken down. But yes, I guess I'd call Molten Death a traditional or a soft boiled. There isn't any, there's no sex, there's no violence on the page, there's no or bad swearing in it or anything. But it is definitely more edgy than some of your very, very cozy cozies.
Good answer. Um, let's see. All right. So this story impact series is about impact, meaning, and purpose. So kind of like reflecting, you've talked a lot about your background and your shift to fiction writing from legal writing. What would you say is your singular purpose as a writer?
Twofold, I'd say. Obviously, it's personal. Clearly have, I think all writers have, at least all fiction writers have the need to tell this story. And so for my first Sally Solari books, I really wanted to tell this story about Santa Cruz, my beloved Santa Cruz, and the food culture here in town, which is fascinating. And as I wrote it, I grew more and more in love with my character, and I wanted to, for myself, flesh out what happens to Sally. I was curious, and so it was partly that. So it's partly personal, but it's also, with that one, I very, very much wanted to write a book about Santa Cruz and show everybody why I loved it so much. So there was that as well. And I'd say with the new series, the Orchid Isle Mysteries, and with the first one, Molten Death, it was similar. I desperately wanted to write a book about Hawaii that was real, because I've read a lot of great books set in Hawaii, but I've also read a fair amount that are just sort of from the tourist viewpoint, and people that clearly haven't spent much time there, and they seem sort of superficial, and or they're the Hawaii that you only see if you go for 2 weeks and stay in Waikiki or Kona. And
Yeah.
since I've become so familiar, I live half time there. I have for 17 years. So I feel like I don't, I'm not in the place where I could tell the story from the viewpoint of a long time, somebody who grew up there, which is, it's not my place to tell that story. But so which is why I made Valerie a fish out of water. She's come from Los Angeles, and she doesn't understand the culture yet, or and so she, along with the reader, learn about it. But I really wanted to tell that story of how beautiful the culture in the island is, and so yeah, I kind of felt like I had to do it. So it was for myself and for the reader.
What do you
Also, I do want to add that as far as mysteries, the reason I think my purpose in writing mysteries is similar to many, many crime fiction writers, is that what's wonderful about them is you take a culture that's gotten disrupted somehow. A murder has happened, and through the hard work and ingenuity and passion of the protagonist, Sleuth, in the book, right, the community is returned back to its place, and normalcy arrives again. And I think in this day and age, one of the reasons crime fiction is so popular is we live in such disruptive times, that to have that happen, where the crime is solved and all is right again, sure, it's not really realistic, but it's a nice feeling, and it's the irony, of course. You're reading about death and mayhem and murder, yet at the same time, it's really what's the word I want? It's satisfying. It's calming. It's because right is returned at the end.
order to chaos. Well, and that's why I read too. I mean, I love reading mysteries because I love the escape of it. You know, I love escaping into other people's problems because they make my own problem
Exactly.
smaller. I have no problem in admitting that. What are you working on next? So Valerie's part of a series, and there's going to be another one in this series. Are you?
There is. I am in the middle of writing book 2 in the series, and it's called Waters of Destruction.
Hmm.
The river that runs through Hilo is the Wailuku River, which means in Hawaiian waters of destruction. And it's this calm looking river in which people drown every year because it's actually very dangerous. There are lava tubes that run in it because it's in the path of an old lava flow. And so people who are unaware will go swimming in there, and the currents are very treacherous, and they can get sucked into the lava tubes and stuck there, and they die. And then days later, their bodies pop out and come over a waterfall. And this actually really happens. I've seen the orange helicopter hovering over the river from my house, trying to find this body, and I thought that's a perfect plot for a murder. And so yeah, so I'm about more than 2/3 done with that. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Right. You want to hold up Molten Death again and
Yes. Happy to do so.
let viewers know where they can buy it?
So it's traditionally published, so you can get anywhere that books are sold. And any bookstore can order it easily.
Okay.
And
When did
yeah,
it come out?
it came out on April 2nd, so it's only been a little over a month. Yep.
Yes.
It's from Severn House, who
Mhm.
I'm very, very pleased with. They're a great publisher, support them.
Awesome. All right, again, this is Story Impact, a YouTube series intended to showcase authors, their writing journey, and the unique perspectives that drive the creation of their books. Please visit lesliekarstauthor.com to check out Leslie's books. And thank you so much for joining us today, and let's keep those stories going.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Really had a great time talking about my books.